Yo, what's up, nerds? It's MTG Man, and with that preview of the new Angel deck for $150, Wizards of the Coast have started doing this whole $150 secret layer deck. They'll have some sort of theme, and then the cards usually end up adding up to like over $300. So I'm gonna present one I've kind of thought up, based on just, well, I guess it's not really even like a theme. It's Jund. I did a bunch of searching into like the history of Jund decks, different cards that have been played. So this is like the definitive Jund feel for Commander is what I would put it at. So the deck's $299. And then I chose Soul of Windgrace as the Commander. So it's a 4 mana 5/4, which is pretty. Yeah, it's on the curve. You can pay green, discard a land, gain 3. 1 in a red, discard a land, draw a card. 2 in a black, discard a land, it gains indestructible. And then whenever it attacks or enters, you can put a land from your graveyard onto the battlefield. Um, there isn't a lot of things playing into this whole land thing. It's a lot of value. You have ways to get lands back. It's going to help you churn through the deck. I think it's kind of what Jund's game plan usually is. It's a little bit grindy, but it has the protection and the draw to get you through a game. So starting with Planeswalkers, Renin 6 is really good. It's going to be returning lands just like Soul and Windgrace, which is great. I wouldn't say Jund Classic because it came out in like 2016 or whatever, but it's a very solid card. It has a lot of power behind it. A little bit less good in Commander, followed up by Liliana the Veil. This is another control staple. And I think this has been in almost every version of Jund there's ever been, Boomer Jund, even new Jund. It's Liliana the Veil's threat. Deathrite Shaman, Ignoble Hierarch, Ragavan, and Young Wolf are going to be the 1-drops for the deck. These 3 can add mana. Well, not add mana, but get you more mana. And Deathrite can exile things from graveyards, can help you gain life, deal damage, whatever. Young Wolf is just a threat. Burning Tree Emissary is going to be one of your 2-drops. Collector Oof is a gate. Dark Confidant is card advantage. Putrid Leech is a classic in the deck. It's just kind of a threat. Scavenging Ooze can help remove stuff from graveyards. It can get big and become a threat. Tarmogoyf is, the backbone of Jund. It's going to get really big, especially with you dumping cards in the graveyard. Young Pyromancer, I'll get to it later, but the deck has like 28 instants and sorceries, so it's going to be accruing value. Moving on to 3-drops, Anathemancer it's a little bit of burn. This was used in sideboards of certain Jund decks. Bone Crusher Giant is another more recent card. It's removal, it's a threat, it's got a great body. Eternal Witness is recursion. Fulminator Mage, though usually a sideboard staple, can be good to destroy non-basic lands. And overall, a 2/2 for 3, though a little bit overcosted, isn't bad. Seasoned Pyromancer is going to be helping you discard cards, churn through your deck, and then creating those tokens. Spouting Thrynax is a classic Boomer Jund card. It's going to help you create those saprolings, just tokens, its value. And I mean, Jund really always has just been a value deck overall. Bloodbraid Elf cascades into more value. Hunt's Master of the Fells is creating wolves, and it transforms. Master of the Wild Hunt is another just value card, creating more wolf tokens. Obstinate Baloth can gain you life, and it can be cheated in if an opponent causes you to discard it. Siege Gang Commander creates goblins that you can sacrifice to deal damage, so it's removal, it's a threat. It's the 2 top-end cards of the deck, also with Broodmade Dragon, 6 mana, 4/4, creates a 4/4 on drop. This is, very Boomer John-esque, but Gravedigger's Cage is usually a sideboard for just graveyard removal. Well, not graveyard removal, but stopping graveyard stuff. Nihil Spellbomb exiles graveyards, can draw you cards. Pithing Needle will help stop threats, slow down the game a little bit. Soul Ring and Arcane Signet, because this still is a commander deck. Batter Skull, I'll just show you. It's a 4/4 Vigilance lifelink that can be returned to its hand. So it's recurable. It's more of a creature threat than anything else. Starting with instant sorceries, we have Slaughter Pact. Destroys a non-black creature. You can pay 2 in black next turn. If you don't, you lose the game. Fatal Push, Lightning Bolt, Magma Sprays, a Shock that exiles a creature that it deals damage to if they die. Unholy Heat's removal, Abrupt Decay, Ancient Grudge, Sathin's Trophy, Golgari Charm can give creatures -1/-1, which does get around indestructible, destroys target enchantment, or regenerates your creatures, so it can help your board from being removed. Rakdos Charm, it destroys artifacts, can deal damage to players, and exiles graveyards, terminates removal. Jund Charm can remove graveyard from the game, deal 2 damage to each creature, put 2+1/+1 counters on target creature. Kolgan's Command returns creatures from your graveyard to your hand, can cause an opponent to discard a card, destroy an artifact, or it can deal 2 damage, which, if I remember correctly, after Errata, so it can hit Planeswalkers now too. Grossun Grip is removal. Faithless Looting is going to help you turn through your deck. It's draw. Inquisition of Kozilek and Thoughtseize are classics for hand disruption. Collective Brutality you can make an opponent discard an instant or sorcery. You can have target creature get -2/-2, or target opponent loses 2 life, you gain 2 life. It's just a bunch of different options. Exsanguinate is another top end. It's going to be a way to finish off games / keep you from losing games. Hymn to Turok is discard. Night's Whisper is draw. Pyroclasm's removal. Rampant Growth is ramp. Anger of the Gods is like a board wipe, kind of like Pyroclasm. Blightning is another discard card. Very Boomer John-esque. Some of these cards aren't really going to help as much in a multiplayer format, but it works. Maelstrom Pulse, again, the second part isn't usually going to come in handy, since you can only play one of each creature, but it can get rid of tokens. Shatterstorm, this might just be worse than Vandal Blast, but it did see play in a lot of older lists. Seal of Primordium is kind of like a disenchant. It's more removal, but it does get around things like Dispel and different counterspells. Fable of the Mirror Breaker, you create a 2/2 that creates treasures. You Faithless Looting, then you can exile it, and it is Reflection of Kiki Jiki. And then Lelia the Void will remove graveyards. If you can't tell, a lot of these cards still do see some play, and Jund lists are somewhat similar. Land-wise, you have Baron Moor, because it's easy to get in the graveyard, and it has also seen some lists. Blackcleave Cliffs, Blood Crypt, Bajuka Bog, Command Tower, Den of the Bugbear. A lot of older Jund decks used land creatures. I guess it was a way to get both lands and creatures in your deck. I don't know. I've just seen it throughout a whole bunch of different lists. Fabled Passage, Firelit Thicket, Hive of the Eye Tyrant, Mountain, Nurturing Peatland, Overgrown Tomb, Raging Ravine, Stomping Ground, Swamp, Treetop Village, Twilight Mire, Verdant Catacombs, and that's about it for the deck. So as you can tell, the land base is pretty good. The ramp is a bit mediocre. However, the average CMC is 2.34, so it's not really going to be that important. Just doing a little test hand. you could go something like turn 1 Forest into Ignoble Hierarch, pass turn 2 Command Tower, Ignoble Hierarch, Seasoned Pyromancer, discarding Brood and Siege Gang, creating 2 tokens, drawing 2 cards, going into turn 3 to Swamp, tap out, Soul of Windgrace. There are no lands in the graveyard, so his ability won't trigger. Firelit Thicket, and then I guess you have stuff up for removal. I mean, the hand almost always will have removal no matter what hand you draw, which is a bonus of the deck. Threat-wise, it is going to have a little bit of a hard time closing the game. And then I'm going to talk about some cards that could have been added, but either didn't fit or we didn't have the budget for. So we do have Verdant Catacomb as a fetch. There were the other fetches like Bloodstained Mire, which is $31, so it wouldn't quite fit in the budget. Boseiju is $30, wouldn't fit in the budget. Maybe if you move something like Ren out, but I felt Ren is a bit more important to the deck's identity. It does follow the game plan a lot, though. It's a land and it's removal. Chalice of the Void has seen play on a lot of lists. I don't know if it's as good in Commander, but it can help shut down the early game. Dragon's Skull Summit could have made it in as a list. It had seen play in a lot of 2013 gen lists, I believe. Engineered Explosives has seen play. Field of the Dead, I felt, would go really well, especially with there being a lot of different land names. I think it definitely follows the Jund plan of just value over time. Rootbound Craig did see play in those same 2013 Jund lists. Takanuma, I felt could be useful in the same way Boseiju is. It is does recur a creature. Wooded Foothills is another fetch that didn't make it in. Zeatora's Proving Ground is the Triome, some would say. You can cycle it for 3. It does have the colors you need, but it just didn't fit in. Aether Vial does see play in a lot of Jund lists. However, with how Commander is and the fact that you only get one of, it doesn't really always make sense. But there's only 4 1-drops, I think like 7 2-drops. It doesn't fit as well as it would in a regular deck where you're going to have a lot more, and there's like less cards for you to be drawing into. Birds of Paradise has never really seen play in Jund lists that I've seen. However, it is good ramp. Duress used to be played in some sideboards that I've seen. I felt that Thoughtseize and Inquisition of Kozilek were good enough, especially with single player discarding really not being as good in Commander. Feign Death could see some play. It's seen more play recently. Haywire Might is removal and has seen recent play. Shadow Spear sees a lot of recent play. I don't think there has been a Jund, like, modern type deck that has played tutors, but Vampiric Tutor would be a good choice. Veil of Summer has seen sideboard play. Its draw, its protection. Braid is more removal. I just wasn't sure if it would be a good fit for the deck. Tarka's Command is just a whole bunch of things it can do. I felt it could be good. However, the land ability probably isn't that useful because you're trying to put lands in the graveyard anyway, and the rest of it was just fine. Bloodghast didn't really fit in the budget, and I've only ever seen it in like 1 or 2 Jund lists, so I just didn't think it would work. However, I did think the landfall trigger could prove interesting, especially with trying to bring lands back. Demonic Tutor, again, tutors are great. Dockside Extortionist, I think, would fit into the Jund value plan, but it's never really seen play in other Jund decks because it's only really legal in legacy formats, and $50 really is a lot for the budget. Felwarstone, Signets, things like that. There's more of those coming up. I think could have been good additions to the deck. Low mana ramp to help round out the mana curve. However, as I said previously, the curve is low enough where I don't think it matters. Croxa enters and each opponent discards a card. Then each who didn't loses to 3 life. I just thought it. I've seen it in, I think, a Jun list. I thought it could be good for the deck. I've seen Lotus Cobra like once or twice throughout my research. Um, it could be nice with Soul of Windgrace getting back lands to add more mana with Lotus Cobra. However, that's an attack trigger, and your mana pool would empty by then, so I don't think it's really worth it. Manamorphose is more or less just a free draw. Could play into the deck. Mind Stone is one of those 2 mana rocks. Orcish Bowmasters has been popping up a lot recently. However, it is $40, so it would really hurt the budget. Rakdos Signet. Shieldred's Edict is it fits into the game plan a lot. However, I felt targeted removal might be a bit better, and this card is a bit more recent, while the deck is trying to be more of like a overall Jund experience. Even if it does use a lot of recent cards. Talisman. Again, for early game ramp. Terra Sunder. I think this card can go in any deck that's playing green black. I've seen it in a couple more recent lists, but it just didn't make it in. Thrill of Possibilities I thought would be great because you could discard a land, draw 2 cards, but I just didn't have a slot. Same with Ren's Resolve, just being a draw 2 kind of. I thought it could be good, but I couldn't find a good place to slot it in. Zerta Druid, never really saw any play, but I think it being a mana dork that drains your opponents over time kind of fits into the Jund plan as her odds maker. So you discard a card, choose a creature, and when that creature deals damage to a player this turn, you draw 2. I think that definitely fits into the discarding cards that I want to be doing anyway, and then like discard a land with it, get it back with Soul of Windgrace when it attacks, and then it draws 2 cards as well. Blood Moon does see play in Jund lists. However, I felt that the deck does play enough non-basics for Blood Moon to be its own problem. Cultivate is ramp. I think Descent into Avernus being this dealing damage to each player over time and then giving value to everybody kind of fits into the Jund plan in the whole value over time thing, but the fact that it also gives value to your opponents I think hurts it. Endurance is a more recent card that sees a lot of play. Great Sable Stag is actually a legacy Jund card that has seen a lot of play over the years. However, I felt that it was just understated, underpowered for what the deck was going for. Same with Hero's Downfall. Used to see play in like 2013 Jund. However, I don't think it's really worth it anymore. I think the deck had enough removal to not need it. Jessica's Will is a commander staple, and I think it would fall into the Jund game plan and help accelerate the deck a little bit. I just didn't find a good place to slot it in. I think Lightning Skelemental, again, it has that same game plan. It's slapping in for face and then making that player also discard cards. I've seen Liliana the Last Hope in a couple lists, Jund cards wise. However, I don't think you're ever going to get to that ultimate, and I don't think the +1 is as good as the other Liliana's +1, where everybody discards a card. I don't think it has enough control of the game. Phyrexian Rita used to be played in some older Jund decks. I think Dark Confidant just does a better job sometimes. I'm not a fan of Dark Confidant, but I think it's more in tune with, like I've said before, the whole legacy of Jund decks. Ruminop Excavator can go really well in this deck in particular with Soul of Windgrace, just in case you can't get lands back with him. Tireless Tracker is going to be benefiting off that landfall with Soul of Windgrace's bringing lands back. I've seen it in, I think, 2 Jund lists. It's not really suited for this kind of deck, though. Violent Outburst is Cascade and pumps the whole team, which I felt kind of followed a similar plan, but just never really fit. Big Score is Drawing and Treasures, which could fit the plan, but I didn't have room for it. I've seen Chandra, Torch of Defiance in a couple different lists. She is like kind of card draw. She's kind of ramp-ish. She is removal. I think the card could see place in the deck, but I just didn't think the deck needed another Planeswalker. Dead and Gone is another removal spell that could have been in the deck, but I thought it just had enough removal as is. Force of Vigor is the same, except $20 also kind of hurt the budget. It could get slotted back in, I'm just not sure where. I thought Grief could go in, and Feign Death was on the list earlier. I do think Jund and Scam could have some sort of overlay, but I think Grief just in general falls with that whole Thoughtseize type of plan. Questing Beast had seen some play in different lists I looked at. I didn't think it would be a good fit. Shieldred is another more recent card that sees play in Jund lists. It's a very, very strong card. However, $70 is like almost a quarter of the budget, so I wasn't going to slot it in anywhere. The One Ring is the same, seeing a lot of play in recent lists since it came out. It could add to the power of the deck, but I just didn't want to. I think, it's almost 60, and that's like 20% of the budget, so wasn't worth it. Throne the Last Troll has seen play in different Jund decks. I just didn't think it was strong enough to be in this one. Fury, again, is a more recent card that I think could see play in decks. Crush the Blood Braided was originally what I was going to make the commander. However, I thought Soul of Windgrace just played into the more general value over time plan. Master of Cruelties could be a good way to end the game. Definitely a bit more explosive. I think Omnixilus could be a cool way to benefit off of the Lord Windgrace plan, but it just never seems strong enough. It seems a bit overcosted. Obsidian Charmal sees play in more recent lists, and I thought could be slid into the deck, but I didn't. I think Gitrog would benefit greatly off of Lord Windgrace, because you could sacrifice lands, get them back with Lord Windgrace, but I just wasn't sure if it was Jund enough, because this deck is, sure, it's trying to be strong, but it's also trying to be that classic Jund feeling with classic Jund cards. Same with Titania, because lands go into graveyard. Yeah. Then again, she wants them to go from the battlefield to the graveyard, whereas Lord Windgrace was generally just discarding them. Avenger of Zendikar, I think, could be good. It does have that whole go wide thing, and it could benefit with the landfall. And then I saw a good number of decks that played the other Emrakul, the Aeon's Torn, as a top end, or with Through the Breach. That card isn't legal in Commander, so I wasn't really sure. And then if you look at it, the maybe board of cards that could have been in the deck is like $800, so you could see why they didn't quite fit in the deck. But overall, I do think it would give a somewhat classic Jund feel, and I think it'd be worth a shot. It's really a deck concept more than anything else, but Wizards of the Coast should hire me. I'd be sick. That's about it, though. Peace. Tell me what cards you would put in this deck, all that.